In just 3 years, a single disaster killed as many as 50 million people across India, China, Brazil, and Africa. That is a death toll larger than the First World War. Yet almost nobody alive today has ever heard its name. It began quietly, with warm water sliding east across the Pacific Ocean, thousands of miles from anyone it would kill. Between 1876 and 1878, the rains that fed half of humanity simply failed to arrive. Historians call it the global famine. One journalist who watched it happen called it among the most terrible failures of the century. In southern India alone, more people probably died than in every conventional battle from Austerlitz to Antietam combined. In northern China, entire provinces emptied out. In Brazil's dry northeast, hundreds of thousands perished on the roads. And here is the strangest part. In most of these places, there was still food. People did not starve because the earth ran out of grain. They starved because of decisions made by other people. So what force could reach across 3 continents at once? And why did it turn so unbelievably deadly? The answer starts in the tropical Pacific, where trade winds normally pile warm water up against Asia like a tilted bathtub. Every few years the winds slacken, the warm water sloshes back east, and rainfall patterns around the world lurch out of position. Scientists now call this El Niño, and the event that began in 1877 was among the strongest ever recorded. Worse, it followed 6 years of unusually cool Pacific water, then teamed up with a second disturbance in the Indian Ocean. The result was a drought that scientists rank as the most intense to strike monsoon Asia in 800 years. In Madras, the observatory logged 6.3 inches of rain that whole year. The normal was nearly 28. The monsoon did not just weaken. In southern India, northern China, and Brazil it vanished for 2 years. Crops failed in Java, Egypt, Morocco, Ethiopia, and Korea in the same seasons, something no one had ever recorded before. We're stunned. Nobody had suspected weather could fail simultaneously across the entire tropical world. But drought is only half of a famine. The other half would be supplied by human beings. British India in 1876 had railroads, telegraphs, and grain surpluses. Every tool needed to stop a famine cold. Instead, the Viceroy, Lord Lytton, held to a strict doctrine. Government must never interfere with the market. As harvests collapsed, merchants used the new railroads to haul grain out of starving districts and into guarded central depots. The telegraph let traders coordinate price hikes in 1,000 towns at once, faster than any relief could move. Speculation became a frenzy. One official reported jewelers and cloth dealers pawning their wives' jewelry just to gamble on grain. Block by block, the technologies built to bind India together were making the famine worse. Relief finally came with conditions. Sir Richard Temple demanded hard labor in exchange for rations of 1,600 calories a day. The relief camps were overcrowded and unhygienic. Cholera and dysentery swept through, and the weakest were turned away. Through it all, grain ships kept leaving Indian ports. Cereal exports would triple in the decades around the famine. Somewhere between 5 and nearly 10 million Indians died, while a very different kind of collapse was unfolding in China. For centuries, Qing emperors ran a vast safety net, the ever-normal granaries, filled against exactly this disaster. In good years, the granaries bought grain cheap. In droughts, they released it, holding prices down and keeping villages alive. But by 1876, the system was a shell. The Taiping Civil War had bled the dynasty of money and men. That war had killed perhaps 20 to 30 million people, and the granaries were never properly refilled afterward. So when the Guanxi drought struck northern China, the empire's ancient famine machine simply was not there. 1877 became the drought's most severe year, the deadliest phase of a 5-year catastrophe. Families sold their tools, then their land, then everything, and the roads filled with the desperate. When rains finally returned late in 1878, an estimated 9 to 13 million people were gone. Western missionaries rushed relief inland, 14 years after Western armies helped weaken the state that once fed these provinces. 2 empires, 2 ideologies, one death toll after another, and a third country was about to complete the pattern. In Brazil's northeast, the sertão dried to bone, and through 1877 hundreds of thousands of refugees walked toward the coast. Hundreds of thousands died, possibly far more, while local elites found that running drought relief was very good business. 3 continents, 3 governments, 1 climate event, and everywhere the same lesson, written in the same terrible arithmetic, where those in power protected markets and budgets instead of people. Drought became mass death. Where relief was real, communities scraped through. The radical journalist William Digby chronicled the Madras famine, and he made a prophecy about the British Empire. He wrote that 50 years on, historians would judge the needless deaths of millions of Indians its most notorious monument. Darwin's partner in discovery, Alfred Wallace, agreed, calling the famines the century's most terrible failures. Yet Digby's prophecy failed. The Dickensian slum stayed in the history books, and the famine children of 1876 disappeared. Tens of millions dead, and the event has no memorial, no anniversary, and until recently barely a mention in Western textbooks. Why does one of the deadliest disasters in recorded history have no name you learned in school? Part of the answer is where it happened. The dead were colonial subjects, far from the capitals that wrote the histories. Part is how it happened. Famine looks like nature's crime, and nature is a convenient defendant that never stands trial. It took until the year 2000 for the historian Mike Davis to reassemble the whole story in late Victorian holocausts. His verdict, still debated today, was that ideology armed with weather, not weather alone, killed those tens of millions. Modern science has reconstructed the drought and confirmed what its victims knew. Nothing like it in 800 years. After the El Niño famines of the 70s and 80s, the world built a famine early warning system. That system watched the oceans and moved food ahead of catastrophe. And for 50 years, it mostly worked. Today, researchers warn that this apparatus is falling apart, even as El Niño keeps returning on its ancient, irregular clock. 50 million people once learned what happens when the Pacific shifts and the powerful look away. Forgetting them is a choice. Next time, the night in 1859 when the sky caught fire, and why engineers say our world might not survive a repeat.